Hello and welcome once again to this RedGamingTech video. Myself, Amato. As always, I'm here with the latest news from the tech world in the last 24 or so hours. Today we are going to kick things off with an article from the Wall Street Journal on the PS5. So, you will of course find the article linked in the description below this video, but apparently the TLDR of it is apparently that Sony are going big or going home when it comes to getting those large third-party developers signed on to give them either timed exclusives or of course pure exclusives. Now this is obviously to combat what Microsoft have been doing with the Xbox Scarlet. I have discussed many times, of course as Paul, how aggressive Microsoft have been in the acquisition of some pretty big names when it comes to studios, and they're going to have some very tasty looking exclusives come out of those studios, I'm sure. They were not shy E3 2018, excuse me, how many studios they acquired, and they have been continuing to be that aggressive ever since. They know that the lack of games have kind of become a bit of a meme for the Xbox One. They don't want to repeat that again. So of course Sony is looking to match them here. They're looking for more exclusive deals, timed exclusive deals on third-party games, and of course exclusive DLC. And apparently this is going on to the point where smaller developers, indie developers, or even just medium-sized ones are getting a little bit concerned because, as you might expect, to convince a publisher to only put their game on one system, even if it's only for a few months, is basically asking them to give away money because, they want their games on as many platforms as possible to maximize sales. So Sony has to counter that with a very generous offer, especially if it's a full exclusive. So naturally there's concerns that Sony is not going to have a lot of scratch kicking around for those smaller games, and the PS4 was a really nice place actually for indie games. So that would be a bit of a shame to see, but we'll have to see how true those concerns end up being. But Sony would be very foolish to not at least try and attempt this because, well, again, Microsoft have not been messing around when it comes to the amount of studios they've been acquiring and the amount of money they must have thrown at those deals. Well, yikes. I don't even want to think about the bill for those. Whether or not this ends up being successful for Sony, I think really depends who they manage to get on board. If they manage to get the right people on board, then yeah, they could very much be at least in lockstep with what Microsoft are doing, but of course we'll have to see. So we're going to move on now to some comments from AMD regarding a recent report, which again was from the Wall Street Journal. So this topic is rather complicated, and I'm going to give you the cliff notes, but I'll try my best to explain it as I understand it. Now you may have seen the report floating around again from the WSJ over a CPU licensing deal with China. Now, the Wall Street Journal released a report which was called How a Big US Chipmaker Gave China the Keys to the Kingdom, and basically makes some pretty bold claims that the deal saved the company financially, but also, quote, alarmed US national security officials who sought to rein in China's supercomputing industry. So, AMD have released a statement and have strongly, as you might expect, refuted this report because the report essentially claims that they improperly sold x86 CPU technology to China. So, I'm going to go through AMD's statement and then I'm going to go through a little bit about the background of this. And they say, quote, the Wall Street Journal contains several factual errors and omissions and does not portray an accurate picture of the joint ventures that AMD entered into with THATIC in early 2016. AMD takes strong exception to characterizations in the story that it did not act properly or transparently in creating the joint ventures. So you might go, okay, what is this joint venture they're talking about? Give me some background here, I'm a bit lost. Well, it's a joint venture between AMD and Sugon Information Industry, which is a military supplier and supercomputer developers. And this was a quite lucrative deal. $293 million in licensing fees plus royalties on any semiconductors resulting from this joint venture. And they also then sold 85% of two of its semiconductor factories for $371 million, at least according to the report. I just want to reiterate, this is according to what the report says. And further according to the reports, the partnership was a quote-unquote game changer for China. Now I will say there is a really, really nice write-up on WCCF Tech by Usman Pazada, whose name I probably just butchered, so do forgive me if I have pronounced your name incorrectly there, on exactly how the joint venture works. It is a very complex topic. I'm very much giving you the cliff notes here. I will include a link to the WC article in the description below this video, but I would highly recommend you give it a read because it is really, really interesting. Now, AMD are basically, long story short, staunchly saying, no, they did everything by the book, and they were also very transparent in its interactions with the US government, basically ahead of time when it came to doing these joint ventures. And they went to continue to say, starting in 2015, AMD diligently and proactively briefed the Department of Defense, the Department of Commerce, and multiple other agencies within the US government before entering into the joint ventures. AMD received no objections whatsoever from any agency to the formation of the joint ventures or to the transfer of technology which was lower performance than other commercially available processors. In fact, prior to the formation of the joint ventures and the transfer of technology, the Department of Commerce notified AMD that technology proposed was not restricted or otherwise prohibited from being transferred. Given this clear feedback, AMD moved ahead with the joint ventures. And again, this is pretty much backed up by WCC's fairly exhaustive reports that, according to their own sources, and I'm assuming a metric ton of research, they're pretty much backing up what AMD are saying. And they also rightly point out, and again I would highly recommend you read their article just because it's a really interesting read and very well researched, I have to say, that it wasn't the deal that turned AMD around, it was Zen. You know, I myself have been harping on, as has Paul, pretty much since day one, that Zen has pretty much saved AMD. Like, there's no pretty much about it in all fairness. Zen has been an amazing architecture for them, and it's only continued to get better as it's improved. And of course we've got the future iterations, Zen Plus, of course now Zen 2, and all the exciting stuff that's now being heard about Zen 3. So Zen was the start of the turnaround for AMD. So AMD are not best pleased with Wall Street Journal right now, so, you know, let's put it mildly. But again, do read WCC's report. But it is interesting because, of course, if there's any merit at all to their claims, then AMD could be in a lot of hot water. But we'll have to see what happens. But after doing my own research and looking through AMD's comments and, of course, going through my own research and WCC's rather exhaustive report, I'm inclined to believe them, but you are welcome to disagree, and of course post your feelings in the comments. We're going to finish things up, however, with a few benchmarks, the first of which is Ryzen 3600X. As what we have is a user benchmark which has surfaced on the internet. So we have a rank of 13, however for the single core score we do see 143 points, a quad core score of 560 and a multi-core score of 1110. And to be honest with you, this is a very, very impressive result. This is an outstanding result, as you can see for yourself on the user benchmark. And if you look at the comparison list, which will be linked in the description below, it is basically just outside of the top 25, which, considering it is not even one of the flagship, it's the 3600X, it's still ranking fairly near the top and achieved a pretty impressive result, in my personal opinion. However, we have a benchmark next for the 2070 and 2060 Super. So these are Geekbench scores which were helpfully tweeted by Tom Apisak, whose name you should be very, very familiar with at this point. And let's go through the score for the RTX 2060 Super first, as we have an OpenCL score of 2486.92, so 248,692, to put it in a slightly more understandable format. But what about the 2070 Super, I hear you ask? Well, the OpenCL score for that is 270,978, or 270,978. That's not the only benchmarks I actually have for you now. I have another one, again thanks to Tom Apisak, on Ashes of the Singularity Escalation. And we have some scores here for the 2070 and 2060 Super versus their vanilla counterparts, and this is on a crazy 1440p benchmark preset. So we see a score for the 2070 Super at 6200 versus the 5500 of the vanilla 2070, and then the 2060 Super scores at 5200 versus the 4700 of the vanilla counterparts. So again, while this is only a single benchmark, and I always stress that we should wait for more to get a more complete picture, you can still see the improvement that these cards have in this one benchmark versus their vanilla counterparts. Be really interested to see your opinion on these improvements, guys. That is me done for this video. Thank you so much for watching, As always, do like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, it does help out a great deal, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.